Let's lower this. I'm always shocked when people ask me to speak because I'm like, they heard me last time, but they let me come back and talk, so it's awesome. I'd like to thank everyone who's invested in us, candidates from the division. So many countless people have had their hands in our lives, and we trust and know that everybody has been appointed by God for the right time to be placed in all of our lives. So on behalf of all of us, I want to say thanks. My name is Amber Mayo. I'm blessed to be standing up here tonight. I am the youngest of 4 children, and I'm an OB. But I just want to clear the air. I'm an officer's blessing, not an officer's brat. I believe that my calling came when I was just a young girl. Growing up as an officer's kid, I can remember being at the Bronx Citadel Corps at 5 years old and watching my parents in their uniform with their sleeves rolled up, serving the homeless people in our soup kitchen. That's one of the earliest memories I have. And I can also remember stories of my family members kind of scolding and chiding my parents for letting me and my siblings run around with crazy hair and bare feet among all these homeless people, But we didn't know the difference between a homeless person or a housewife, Everyone was the same for us. I can also remember loving those people within that community deeply and having them love us and pour their love out on me and my siblings. Some of you have heard me tell this story before, but I can also remember a time when I was 10 years old, and my mom was driving me and my sisters home from the Corps, and we saw this homeless man on a bench. And I start sobbing at the sight of this man who is destitute. And since I was so upset over this man, when we got home, my mother let me prepare this man some dinner. And at 10 years old, my culinary skills were, up to par with other 10-year-olds. So this gentleman received a gallon-sized Ziploc bag full of gourmet peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, along with, to make it even better, all of my Valentine's Day candy. I just dumped it all in there, because he probably needed some. But looking back at that experience, I know that heart for people is something that confirms my call today. By the time I had turned 16, things had taken a shift. My goal in life was no longer to help the hurting and forgotten people of this world, but instead they were to help myself and to forget about anybody who got in my way. And ironically enough, much of my anger was aimed at the Salvation Army. At this point, my parents had gotten divorced, and my mother was not only a single parent, but a single officer. And looking back now in retrospect, I can see that my mother did an amazing job raising me and my siblings. But as a teenager, it didn't feel that way. I felt like my mom, her priority was the Corps, and we kind of fell behind that. I know now that that's so far from the truth, but that's how I felt. So my life became one where I surrounded myself with other people who felt like me and made the same poor and unhealthy decisions as I did. And then through a string of events that can only be described as divine, God-given events, at the age of 18, I accepted Christ into my heart. I became involved at my home corps, which was the Tampa Corps, and I couldn't deny that I was receiving a call to officership. But I could refuse that calling, and that's exactly what I did. But not only did I refuse that calling, I rescinded my soldiership, because that was how I was going to show God who was really running the Amber Show, because it's a great show. You should all watch it. But, I was so scared that my children would grow up feeling the way that I did, that my children would feel like I was putting my calling before them, even though I know now that God calls whole families. I trust that if God called my mom as a child, he called me to be an officer's blessing. But I couldn't move past that fear at that time. So I tried to find peace in other ways that were less destructive. I thought, what if I move? What if I stay? What if I get married? What if I fill in the blank? And so I changed my major a total of 5 times, which my mom was really happy about. I was hoping for some peace, and I thought that if I get as close to officership without being an officer, I would find that. And so finally I settled on being a victim's advocate. I was going to help people who were victims of crime, and that would give me the peace I was looking for. But I didn't find any. I don't know how, but over time, God tugged on my heartstrings, a little softer this time, though. And I began to think about becoming an adherent. I was taking baby steps. And so I called my mom, and I said, Mom, what if I just become an adherent? And my mom's so patient with me. She was like, that's a great idea. I really think you should pray about it. And then several months later, I prayed about becoming an adherent, and I was like, no, that's not enough. So I called my mom again, and I said, what if I became a senior soldier again? And she says, that's a great idea. You should definitely pray about it. And about that time, I met the person who would be my future husband. And he had this fire in his heart for the Salvation Army and for Christ that I had not seen in such a long time. He loved the Army and its mission more than I think I ever did at that point. I had this chip on my shoulder that wouldn't allow me to see all the blessings that have been bestowed upon me, And we would talk about my reservations towards officership and my fears, and he would always refute them with something that I know now is wisdom that was only given to him through Christ Jesus. And I shared my calling with him, how I felt I was called to officership. And he was one of the few people other than my family that I had shared that with. And then when I started talking about re-enrolling as a senior soldier, he said the same thing that my mom said. That's a great idea. You should pray about it. And I did. But I was still trying to hold on to the production of the Amber Show, And I said, okay, God, I'll become a senior soldier if. And I gave God this long list of conditions. And God, in his great mercy, met all those conditions for no reason, because he could have just said, buck up, you're doing it. But he didn't. He met me where I was. And on March 18th of 2012, I re-signed my Articles of War. And then shortly after that, I attended the commissioning ceremony of the Friends of Christ session. And sitting there in that auditorium, I realized, this is it. You're not going to find that peace any other way. This is what you were called to. but I still was filled with so much fear. And I'll never forget this moment. I'm crying and I'm saying, Lord, I love my future kids too much to do this. And he says, I love your future children more than you do or can or ever will because I created them. And then at that point, at that moment of surrender, I was given the peace that I had looked for so long. This past year has been huge for me. I graduated with my bachelor's degree in criminology. I married the man of my dreams, and I actually got to work in my field for a year, which was one of the contingencies that I placed on God for officership. But worth more than all of those things, all of those blessings that God gave me, is the peace that I've received by turning the will of my life and the will of my children's life to the leading of Christ. And he happens to be leading us down the path of full-time officership. Thank you.